Hello, and thank you for attending this Nitro Security webcast. If you'd like to download the slides to follow along or take notes, you can find them on our website at nitrosecurity.com/webcasts.
Well, once again, Jerry, thanks for having me today. And as you said, we're here to talk about SIEM and log management. This is a presentation that is in conjunction with the research effort that we did at Securosis called Understanding and Selecting SIEM and Log Management. And really what we want to do today is we want to talk about some of the current trends with SIEM adoption and some of the drivers that are pushing SIEM and log management technology into new directions. So we're getting a lot of inquiries nowadays within our practice, our analyst firm, Securosis. And we really have a lot of information to share both on the vendor side as well as on the customer side as far as demand. But I want to make it clear, this presentation is being sponsored by Nitro Security, but all of the content is developed independently at Securosis and represents our objective research positions. All of this content was developed in the community and has been open to comments while we have been doing the research portion for the white paper and the presentation. So really what I'm going to cover today has to do with the drivers, the technology, and some of the new trends, and then I'll go into some of the buying criteria that you're going to need to know about if you're looking into these technologies. And once again, as I said before, I'm going to focus not on the evolution of SIEM, SAM, and log management. What I really want to do is look at the evolving trends that we're seeing today. We are getting phone calls from both Fortune 500 as well as mid-sized organizations, and all of those phone calls are falling into one of three categories. One, that they currently have log management, but they need to get more actionable information out of the data that they currently have. Many of the times this is because they're unable to see threats that they're falling victim to. And in some cases, there's just simply too much information. They're overloading some of the people that they have in place today. We're also getting a lot of inquiries from organizations, especially in the mid-size, that are falling under regulatory guidelines that they haven't had before, either because the regulations are new or because the regulations now have teeth. And so they're being advised to look at SIEM for compliance reporting, compliance automation, and the storage of that information. And then we get a lot of organizations that have one or two security people on staff, and they're literally just unable to process all of the information that they have. They're doing ad hoc forensic analysis, and that's not really enough. There needs to be more efficient operation. They need to be able to leverage some of that data into their operations for patching, for patch management, for configuration management, as well as the forensic analysis that needs to be done. So really these are the three business justifications and use cases that we see. React faster. What does that really mean? It means to be able to automate threat and fraud detection, less manual inspection, more implementation of workflow and trouble ticketing responses. There's a certain efficiency by being able to take your policies, whether it be for compliance or for operations or for security, and within those policies build in the workflow of who is going to get the alert, how it's going to be handled, if it looks like it's a serious event, what the escalation procedures are. So SIEM is integrated within a number of other security and response tools to be able to allow organizations to understand and react faster to the information that they have. And it's important because SIEM and log management traditionally has given you enough information to see events, and correlation allows you to start, seeing the what. But more and more we're being asked to move up the stack, to look at operating system activity, to look at application activity, and understand who and why in addition to that. The other major use case is efficiency, less time managing. If most of your audience members, I'm assuming, have some sort of IT role, either in security or operations management, and you know how budgets get cut and the number of requirements that are thrust upon you, whether they be regulatory or operations, are ever increasing. So by being able to automate some of these compliance tasks and some of the operations tasks just makes it less time consuming. And this is a major complaint that we hear with SIEM products today. how much time it takes me to set it up. There's an ongoing regular occurrence of having to update and manage the policies, and the deployments are rather time intensive to be able to set up the policies, to set up the reports, and to get the integration work done. So these are the things that we're starting to see the vendors get pushed by their consumers to be able to handle this, automating the detection for configuration errors and missing patches, to help automate the basic forensics that we know how to automate, reporting, and some of the other types of policies that we see. And then perhaps most important, compliance. And this is often a because you have to kind of driver. You have to comply, otherwise you will be fined. Obviously Sarbanes-Oxley carries jail time for executives. We haven't seen anybody get convicted yet, but there are a number of compliance cases out there where the regulatory authorities do have teeth. The fines are considerable. So a lot of the calls that we get from customers are, get compliant now. What do I need to do to get compliant today? To be able to collect the information they need, whether it be for PCI or for SEC regulations, to store the data securely, and be able to provide that to auditors on an ad hoc basis when they're asked to do so. A lot of what we see also is to be able to implement controls that they don't have the capability of doing today. And so we see additional requests for new type of analytics, for new reports, and even new types of data collection from different sources, such as databases or applications. And finally, better filtering and auditing of the data that they collect. So really, a lot of use cases. There's a lot of overlap in how the products meet these three different use cases, but that's what we're seeing on a regular basis. So I'm not going to go into great detail, but I want to cover at least some of the features and functions of SIEM to kind of frame the discussion of what we have today versus where we see the vendor community going. So data collection options are numerous for SIEM and log management. By and large, we see agent-based collectors, which have the wonderful ability to get just about every piece of information off a source, whether that be a firewall, whether that be an operating system, whether that be a networking device, and be able to give us a quality of information that we need. However, those agents are harder to deploy, they're harder to maintain, and in some cases they simply can't reside on the source product or source device. So we see direct connections. A lot of times it's through a native protocol. So you write a program, and SIEM provides this for you by writing the program to connect to the source and collect the events and pull them back into the SIEM log management tool. But there are a number of other ways we can collect information as well. So we can pull it from syslog or Windows event logs, proprietary syslog outputs by the various device vendors, as well as some other intermediary types of connectors or programs that allow us to pull information and back into the SIEM product. So all of these have their particular uses. Every single one has a certain advantage. Some of them are faster, allow us to get information off in a quickly and timely manner so we can actually do analysis quickly in our near real time. Other ones are easier to manage and don't require any particular porting or work to get the data to us. Some of the older devices are cranky and literally very difficult to get the device information off, and this is where it really helps to to have a SIEM or log management vendor that is keeping their device APIs and connectors up to date. Which you choose may not be a matter of choice. If you have to monitor a particular device, you may only have one option. In other cases, you're going to have a couple of different options, whether it be OS log files. You're going to have the ability to use either agents that can batch up that information and do an efficient extraction of the data. In other cases, you can have it so that it actually processes the events in near real time on that platform or some sort of intermediary platform. Once we've collected the data, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do aggregation. Basically what that means is take all the data from the different data sources and put them into one location. And I say one euphemistically here. I'll go into more detail about how this data gets stored in the future, but aggregation is basically the process of taking all of the data sources and putting them into one location so that we can perform other activities and analysis on that data. The data storage types that we're seeing, by and large today, we're seeing indexed file storage. Whereas historically, relational databases were used. They do not have the performance and throughput that we need to see nowadays. So the majority of SIEM and log management vendors have gone to, in most cases, a proprietary flat file. It's indexed rather than doing a relational search with relational database queries. We are now seeing a Google-esque type of search based upon the indexes that are created on the flat files as the data is collected into the SIEM appliance. So this allows us for a great deal of flexibility in the type of data we record and store, and also allows us to be very flexible in keeping additional information that a particular device or application will provide to us, so we have extra information to do analysis with. And this is important because as we take that information and we try to run reports, and we try to run an analysis on it, we need to come to some sort of common ground about how we handle these events that are inbound. So process of normalization is really the second piece of the puzzle. We're taking all of the events, we're taking the common 8 or 9 attributes of those events, and we're putting them into storage so that we can reference, which device, what time of day, what sequence of events, where's the device location, if there is a user or any sort of other operation that is associated with that action. We can tell, we can write reports on this, and we can do some basic analysis with this data. The major trend that we are seeing today, however, is with enrichment. And this is where things start to get really interesting. Technically, a lot of enrichment is new, and much of what we're going to be talking about in the advanced feature portions are what makes this show what the value is being provided in terms of data storage. So when I have a particular event come in and I store it in the database, I may do additional lookups into an identity management system to be able to de-anonymize which user actually made this request, so not just an IP address and not just a generic user account, but the specific user that issued the request. This can come from application logs and identity management. I may do a referential check into a database to be able to find the operation or cross-reference a particular event that I have stored with another log file to pull in the actual, let's say, database SQL query that was issued against the database, and not just know that it is an update operation, but actually see the exact parameters that were used, and so I know which rows were affected. We're also seeing enrichment with the workflow and other types of trouble ticketing, so that if an event comes in, we know that it's been handled, or if it's in process, or what the actual status of that event is. So enrichment allows us to provide multiple data sources and use it in such a way that we are able to gain more information about what this particular event meant. Let's move on to specific analysis. I move correlation into analysis because it's really what correlation is the grouping of several different events that come in from different devices, usually. They may be associated with one another because they come from a particular location, or they're initiated by a particular user, or they have some sort of common thread through them. And this is a great tool for forensic analysis to be able to track what a user was doing over time, and allows us to better understand what the intention was. If we can see a trail of events, it allows us to understand if this was normal behavior or perhaps abnormal behavior or even malicious behavior. So correlation is one of the pieces or advantages to a SIEM platform that really helps us with some of the forensic analysis that we need to do with the data that we collect. Analysis and reporting, I've mentioned correlation. Forensic analysis is still one of the fundamental values of a SIEM platform. And what we see is a movement from, as I said before, from an ad hoc analysis, from a drilling down into specific events and looking at that supplemental information that's stored in the log files and being able to understand whether it was an attack or whether there was an operational issue or whether it was just normal course of business events. Regulatory reports, reporting, and workflow. This is another major piece of analysis to provide the auditors, to provide the internal operations staff to be able to understand what's really going on with the infrastructure. A lot of this is being automated now to a much greater degree than we saw a couple of years ago. We're also seeing a lot of drill down and deep content inspection, which we weren't seeing before, specifically within both drill down capabilities, so that we can look into a record and find information that is stored within multiple log files, but also cross-referencing a number of different facilities about what's going on. What do you really need to look at? If you're looking at a new tool or you're looking to buttress your existing log management or SIEM solution with some additional techniques and technologies, what do you want to look at? Well, the first thing you need to do is find out what it is you're trying to do. So define the needs. And I can't say this is probably the most critical piece of the entire exercise, because which solution you choose is going to depend heavily upon what the needs are. So some SIEM appliances are more appropriate to some types of compliance. Others are far more appropriate to forensic analysis. It really depends on what you need to do. So get your committee together. Make sure you understand all of the requirements that each one of the committee group members have, whether it's from operations or compliance or internal audit or what have you, and then define how it is that you're going to accomplish these goals. Formalize those requirements and get them out as an RFI to a number of the vendors. Depending upon how those vendors respond, you're going to very quickly be able to identify top 2 to 4 that meet your requirements. Go ahead, bring those 3 finalists in for an evaluation and conduct a proof of concept. Simultaneously, while you're seeing if those vendors actually meet your requirements or not, you want to go ahead and do a cost comparison of the 3. That usually means looking at not only the cost of acquisition, but the cost of day-to-day management and how you're going to deploy the product. And I'll get into a little bit more about that specifically in a second. And then finally, once you have selected and deployed, who is going to do the day-to-day management? Is that going to be an in-house operation? Is it an out-of-house operation through some sort of third-party provider or not? Key selection criteria that we're seeing today: if you've got 5,000 devices that you need to manage, you better find something that's going to scale for that. So that's going to always be one of them. Meeting the business objectives. A lot of these platforms out there today will meet most compliance objectives. They may not do the operational piece you need. They may not have the integration points that you need. And many of them do not have the forensic data yet. As I said, we're seeing a shift, but they're not there yet. Policy and report development. This is an ongoing task. It's very difficult. It's very expensive. You want to be able to go through, implement some sample reports, implement some sample policies, and see what it takes to be able to introduce your policies and maintain them over time. Ease of management goes hand in hand. How many people is it going to take? And then finally, all of the integration pieces that you have to work on. So once again, in summary, understanding your requirements is probably the most important thing you can do. You really have to take a close look at what you're trying to accomplish if you're going to be successful. Understand that this is not a set and forget technology. The day-to-day management is going to be a big piece. Evolving the threats are going to continue to evolve. New devices are going to continue to be introduced into your organization. So plan on things changing. And finally, look at both deployment options, because that's really going to help with scalability and analysis, as well as the individual functions that are offered. And that's basically it. Understanding and selecting SIEM and log management. Thank you very much.
Adrian, thank you very much for that insightful information. We'd like to turn the microphone now to Michael Leland, Chief Technology Officer of Nitro Security.
Thank you very much, Jerry. And Adrian, thank you for your time today. I know it's been a great help to us in understanding our market, and as we start looking out over the customer base we have and the ones we're targeting, it's important to know, not just our own perspective, but also, those of others like Adrian's and then his firm. The important thing about our solution set really stems back to our history. Our history, as many of you might not have a clue at, is we started with the Department of Energy. We built our own Department of Energy relational database. In fact, the very first relational database ever built for the industry was built by us back in the 80s. And we've since taken that technology and leveraged it to a great extent to meet the needs of today's security environment. As Adrian mentioned earlier, it's about the data, and it's about the speed with which and the flexibility with which you can get at the data and use that data to make actionable results. As an organization, we're based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We've grown almost 600% over the last 3 years. Our customer base has expanded greatly, and more importantly, our product focus has been broadened from that of just a pure IPS and SIEM event management company to also encompassing those technologies that Adrian mentioned regarding content awareness, data activity, application visibility. All of that really stems from our core technology of the Nitro EDB database. But the important thing about the technology we're going to talk about is really the scalability and performance that can be achieved and, more importantly, expected from a solution. Those of you who have actually had experience with SIEM solutions in the past might already know the gotchas, the glass ceilings of performance and scalability with respect to the SIEM technology of choice. Hopefully now you can see my slides. My apologies. We've only skipped one slide. So the important thing about the technology, again, is the fact that the technology of the database is what drives the largest portion of value in terms of actual usability. When it takes other vendors or other databases hours to run queries, our database is performing queries in seconds. And it's the ability for you to then take that information and make it yours, make it actionable. More importantly, provide additional forensic activity, provide mean time to resolution that's shorter than others, and also the ability to simply keep as much data as possible online in real time at one time. So when we look back over the threat history and we look back over the event collection model, we see a lot of vendors where 90 days, maybe 180 days, becomes the normal period of time where you can expect to have live data at your disposal. Our belief is that no matter how far back your data goes, no matter how long you've been collecting, no matter how much volume you have, no matter what your EPS rate is, your events per second, that data should be visible to you, should be available to you, should be provided in full visibility and granularity for as far back as you need to go to meet both your compliance and your forensic needs. Our customer base has grown considerably as well over the last few years. Again, our heritage was in the Department of Energy, our federal very strong. And more importantly, on the enterprise side, you'll see a lot of very large enterprise organizations in the Fortune 1000 space that have selected our technology primarily for its benefits in the area of forensic activity, high level of granularity, and performance. We've had a number of recent accolades in the industry, and I'm going to try to skip as much of this as I can to get into the meat of the presentation. Most of this you can see online, and you can get it from our presentation that you can download. The important thing is we've been recognized very highly over the last year and two. In fact, SC Magazine rated us the top 20 products in the last 20 years. The solution itself comes down to this. Our solution architecture is the following technology suites. The NitroView solution is comprised of a number of appliances. Those appliances range from the Enterprise Security Manager, which is the brains of it all for the most part. It's the manager of managers for all of our other appliances. But the other subordinate technologies that exist within the NitroView umbrella are the Enterprise Log Manager, which provides the compliant log management solution. It provides the pristine archiving of those raw logs for the purposes of chain of custody and non-repudiation. In addition to the collection of events and logs in the log management system, though, is the ability to parse that data into the normalized schema that we maintain inside the Nitro EDB, and that data can be collected from a number of third-party vendors and products. In fact, we support almost 300 different vendors, close to 1,000 different products right now for collection. And we collect data about a number of solutions from a number of different mechanisms. Adrian mentioned those multiple solutions that could be used for collection, whether it's pull method, push method, whether it's straight syslog or proprietary APIs. We have invested a great deal of time and energy into making sure that whatever log source you have can be incorporated easily into our facility. And the most important thing is it is a solution that adapts with you to your growing needs, not just from a performance perspective, but also from those interests of third-party event collection. The three other technologies that you see referenced here would be the Nitro Application Data Monitor, the Database Activity Monitor, and the IPS. Our first entry into the security space was, in fact, an IPS. In fact, we released the first intrusion prevention system to the open source under the name Hogwash many years ago. It was a Snort-derived appliance, and effectively it took the inspection engine of Snort, and it leveraged the database behind it for the event collection that was generated by the IPS events. The Database Activity Monitor, as Adrian mentioned, provides you visibility into not just the state of transactions, but also the content of transactions. It's an appliance that sits on the wire, and I'll show you a better slide of this in a second, but it sits on the wire in a promiscuous mode and listens to all transactions to and from your database environments, and then analyzes the information not only about the transaction, but the responses as well. And most importantly, the UI that we provide is described as a single pane of glass. It's a single user interface to show you all of the event data, the analytics, the correlated rules, the policy for all of our devices and third-party devices from which we're collecting events. It normalizes the data into a single schema as well, and that schema is highly indexed. We have almost 26 indexes for every event that we save. The important thing being that those event data sources may not have 26 asset values, may not have 26 variables of attribute data, but as Adrian mentioned earlier, it's the enhancement, it's the normalization, and then the enrichment of data that allows us to have much greater visibility into the transactions in question. And most importantly, it allows you to provide both the compliance requirements, but also we're known for our forensics. We're known for the ability to have as much data at your disposal and as quickly as possible be able to drill into that data, pivot on the information learned, and then go in different directions with the analysis being performed. The reduced mean time to remediation is considerable. We've had customers tell us that in the amount of time it takes them to run one query in a third-party vendor product, they can perform 10 queries in ours. Now, even if 9 of those queries end in dead ends, those are 9 areas you've already gone down. You can cross them off your list for that event. And from the analysis perspective, you've now been able to make the data work for you, not you work for the data. And the other important thing is the entire platform is built around our heritage of database superiority. That means that you, as an operator of the solution, and even the guy who installed the product, has to know not a single thing about SQL. You don't find yourself building SQL queries. You're not building your own select statements and applying the right wheres and join clauses. It's providing all that functionality for you through the nature of the UI. So it's the ability for you to see this information in very high granularity and navigate through and pivot around to that data at your discretion based upon those highly indexed fields to provide what we're now considering probably the only SIEM in the space that has full content awareness. Now, content awareness is different than context. Context is the ability to apply greater enrichment, the ability to understand that an IP address might be known by more than just an IP address. It might be known by a username or a MAC address or a host name. The enrichment process that provides context is critical as well, and we've provided that for a number of years. But it's the ability to look inside of the content that allows us now to leverage this tool in greater forensic activities, to perform more forensic response, and also to provide that level of compliance necessary to guarantee or ensure that sensitive data is not being lost, or more importantly, to ensure that certain threats and attack vectors may not be seen. Content is provided by the nature of the deep inspection. Now, I described one of my products earlier as the IPS, the Intrusion Prevention System, most of you will know, as a signature-based solution that looks at a single packet by packet and determines based upon a signature library if a packet in that nature violates a policy. The Application Data Monitor is very similar in nature, only it analyzes things at the application layer. And at the application layer, it reassembles all of the applications, all of the packets in a specific stream, and reassembles them to the native application from which they originated. It then compares the combined event stream in the application layer to the policy in question. So let's say the policy, for instance, is email. If the application is email and your policy claims that every email leaving your enterprise must have an appropriate disclaimer, any email that's being sent out that is not including that disclaimer can be flagged as a policy violation. Similarly, content within the email, content like attachments and other MIME encodings can also be pulled out. Almost 500 different application types can be seen and collected by the nature of our application content platform. Correlation, as we heard earlier from Adrian, is also a critical component. It describes the nature of watching multiple events from either a single or multiple sources over a period of time that makes the analysis more relevant based upon the threat or potential threat it represents. So, for instance, a single rule from a correlation perspective without content might be simply looking for a volume of things over a period of time. This is a very simple rule to write, 1,000 emails from one company. Now, that might be a very simple rule, but to add a level of content awareness to it, you might be able to look for 1,000 emails from a non-SMTP host. belonging to or not belonging to a whitelist in the environment you have. The reply to address falls outside of your internal domain, and there are 1,000 unique addresses containing the word account and password inside the body or even inside of an attachment. You can then raise certain threat and awareness based upon that specific behavior, only from the nature of the fact that the content inside the payload is now a portion of the correlation activity as well. Application visibility, as I talked about earlier, is really the ability to watch for certain behaviors with respect to patterns of activity events. So as an application is describing its certain behaviors, as it's starting to initiate a connection, as the protocol might be describing its conversation points, all of those things are analyzed so that things like PDF attacks, control channel violations, root cause of most of these things can now be seen based upon the content, not just the transaction or patterns of event behaviors. Data visibility from a database perspective, as Adrian mentioned, is more than just knowing that an activity occurred, that a transaction has been seen. It's the ability to pick the actual SQL statement up off the wire and interpret the fact that if and when this event was successful, and the response from that database query would also be shown in the result set. You can then follow the flow of activity, the session behaviors, to find out from the time that user logged in to the database to the time the user logged out of the database and every transaction seen in between. And I'll show you a simple slide of that in just a second. But it's the ability to analyze things in much greater granularity, have much better volume and scope of information at your disposal, and the ability to then provide this content awareness where other SIEMs lack that visibility. NitroView has been specifically architected to provide that level of granularity and detail. The granularity I mentioned earlier about the database transaction you're seeing here. This forensic granularity shows a single event, you can see here in the top left, of the Oracle successful logout. Now that Oracle successful logout is one transaction that we then pursue a further investigation on. And in looking deeper into that transaction, you can see here that from the time the user logged in, as the user Mel belonging to host Penguin, to the time the user logged out, all the way down at the bottom on query number 10. And you're missing the other 7 transactions in between that I had to rip off because of space limitations, but you've got every one of the transactions performed by that user. During that session, you have the request made in the SQL statement, you have the response made or the response returned from the database itself, volume of activity, as well as if any sensitive data masks are being applied, you can then look for sensitive content inside both the query, response, and request. Correlation is the ability to, again, watch for things that are occurring over a period of time from either a single or multiple sources or to a single or multiple destinations. We also append that information with context like identity, location from a geolocation perspective. We're pulling geolocation from not just the event IP lookup, but also from a MAC address perspective, we're doing flow analysis, and we can also pull that information from a flow record if it's provided to us. So the ability to have events and flows understood in full granularity and context allows you to see not just event transactions being generated by devices like firewalls, IPSs, and hosts, which are admittedly myopic in their perspective of your event data. They only see things that they have access to see. They only have a certain number of segments they protect. They only tell you about the good things that happen, not the bad things. And so it's the flow data that is what helps us tie those events together. An event showing up from your IPS on one side of your network and a firewall on the other side of your network may not have any implied value or connection or meaning until you analyze the flow information that tells you those conversations actually make them part of one conversation or one transaction. And for one quick use case, we'll talk about a forensic breach discovery. When you consider the use case where a query issued against a SQL server has a result set of 1,000 rows. Now, there's a policy that can be defined for every SQL transaction that as a threshold of 1,000 rows, anytime someone exceeds that policy threshold, an event can be generated. That threshold of 1,000 rows can actually be tailored more to be from a specific source, user, or community to a specific database, table, or object, or with content matching specific use cases as well. The resulting email then may have been taken out as a result set, packaged up as a PDF, attached to an email sent out via a Google account to an external address without the corporate disclaimer. The IM that he initiated next would then prove that there's additional behaviors that are in some way suspect, and you can also look for the potential whitelisting of user communities based upon that or sensitive data obtained via the email conversation. And the forensic information that can be assigned to that forensic activity runs all the way from the initial query to the response to the threshold accession to the document that was created as a PDF, to the email that was sent out from and to addresses, all the way down to the IM behavior, in our next release as well, the SIP contents of potential voice conversations that may have taken place, in addition to the follow-on call that was made via IM, could also be via a voice call over a voice over IP wire. So that's a pretty quick description of, more importantly, the overall architecture and solution set of NitroView. Hopefully you've identified where it fits the use cases and requirements that we're promoting, and more importantly, that Adrian talked about earlier. I'll open it up to questions and answers, and I'll turn it back to Jerry for now, and I think we've already got a few questions that people have raised. So with that, I'll thank you and turn it back to Jerry.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yes, we do have several questions. Question from Michael. How much storage is going to be required for event sources in a SIEM environment?
So that's a very subjective question with a very different answer depending on the environment. We have tools that we use to help size the environment to understand exactly what type of events are generated from what types of and volumes of hosts. It all depends on the requirement for event collection and retention. So it depends greatly on the ability to understand what the environment looks like, what the requirements of collection and retention are, and more importantly, how you plan to use the data. If you're planning on effectively utilizing the SIEM for a compliance solution only, then it's the raw log archive that probably needs more storage than does the forensic activity. But if your primary use case is forensics, then of course the database might be flipped in the other direction, where the higher volume might be applied to the forensic activity. Our solution has the ability to be flexible in both areas, with both database growth and scalability on both the log management and retention side, as well as forensic database with no glass ceilings or thresholds. So it really comes down to what types of events and what your usage of those events will look like to determine what the size of the deployment might grow to.
Okay, thank you. It looks like Adrian is back.
WebEx connection.
There was a question about the ability of SIEM to help detect advanced persistent threats.
But okay, so by definition, advanced persistent threat comes from a number of ODAs or unknown attacks, attacks that we don't necessarily know about or how they're conducted at the time that they're conducted. So does it help detect? Maybe. Some of the application intrusion detection and query analysis, which comes from database query analysis, might help with that, with SQL injection attacks, with web application attacks, and so forth. But by and large, the answer is no. What it really does is you hope that it will detect something, but it provides you significantly better forensics and forensic tools than just about any other security tool at your disposal. And that's really where the value with APT type of problems and long-running network compromises, where SIEM can help you to find out what data has been touched, where the attackers have gone, what systems have been compromised, and so forth.
Excellent, thank you. This is a question from Michael. Most platforms come with policy-based built-in reports, like for PCI or GLBA. With new capabilities like content awareness, are there similar templates?
There are similar templates, and we do build our reports based upon a standard use case. But I will also say that it's the ability to very easily adapt that template to your very specific use case of your environment that makes the tool also very, very popular. The flexibility and the ease with which you can take an existing template that might have been built for ISO or PCI, and based upon the fact that your content is different than somebody else's content, for instance, your list of admin users is different than somebody else's, it's a very simple way of modifying the content being used to detect in the policy, and also the templates being used for output and reporting can also be tailored with a custom report builder that's built into the product as well. So yes, the product ships with a number of templates, almost 200 compliance templates built in, and each one of those are also customizable by the end user with a simple on-screen visual report editor.
Okay, thank you. Question for Adrian. What do you see as the biggest driver to the evolution of SIEM tools? Regulatory changes, types of attacks, or the evolution of more complex architectures?
Compliance is certainly the drivers, the primary driver we see. Many companies just simply don't have the option not to do it. And there's also budget involved. whereas a lot of security efforts are nice to have. It remains extraordinarily difficult for anybody in a security department to demonstrate any sort of ROI or justification for the business investment. While we do see it, it's nowhere near the driver today that compliance is. If you're facing fines, or no longer able to process credit cards because you're not meeting PCI compliance, that's a pretty strong motivator.
Exactly. A question from Michael. Are the systems government certified so they can be used in a DoD environment?
They are in fact. One of our key characteristics, in fact, having come from the Department of Energy as well, is the fact that we've gone to great lengths and cost to make the products not only EAL 3 and in some cases 4 certified, which is common criteria, but also FIPS 140-2. So they are on the approved vendor list. One of the only products in the space on the approved products list across the board for the military and again the federal government. Because of the regulations and the criteria that we've gone through.
Okay. Question for Adrian. What are the pros and cons of agent and agentless SIM collection?
Depending upon it will depend somewhat on the device or application type we're talking about. But by and large, an agent-based deployment can be programmed to collect just about any single type of data. In fact, it could be programmed to collect from multiple data sources if it's installed on an application platform. It could be collecting from syslog. It could be collecting from the database activity logs. Those type of deployments are a little more resilient as well because they tend to maintain their communication a little better. Most of the vendors who have written agents also include secure communication so that the event stream can't be compromised or en route. But as I said before in the presentation, if you've got 5,000 devices, you're not going to deploy 5,000 agents. It's just too hard to be able to manage agents across an infrastructure like that. So what we tend to see is a hybrid. Certain platforms, certain critical platforms will have an agent-based deployment, and the rest are some sort of a syslog or device-level API.
Okay, thank you. I think this one is from Michael. Is it easy to filter out and discard unwanted events? My Active Directory is currently about 2.5 gigs a day.
So the answer to that is yes, and the second answer to that is, but would you if you didn't have to? As a security professional, we believe in collection of and storage of as much data as possible because you never know what's important and when. So what most people have become accustomed to is the concept of collect, store, and then discard or in some cases archive that data which you can't keep in active focus. Our product is unique in the fact that it can maintain very large event insertion rates, very large event query speeds, and very large growth in terms of the database scalability without without affecting the performance of the query speeds in general. So what we find in most cases is customers that thought they'd have to archive or filter or purge data at 90 or 60 or 90 or 180 days are actually able to keep data in there for years and still protect the same performance data that they appreciated the very first day they installed it. So the answer is yes, it can be filtered, but even at a rate of 2.5 gigs a day, that would not hurt a system like ours based upon our significant advantages in database performance.
Okay, thank you. This question's for Adrian. Are cloud-based SIM solutions viable at this point?
Wow. Probably not. I guess I should really fire back and push back on it. What really is the definition of the cloud that you're using? I don't want it to be a cop-out, but it really kind of depends on what you're attempting to accomplish. What model of cloud deployment we're actually talking about, whether if this is some sort of an in-house virtualization server, that's one thing. If it's Amazon AWS, I'm not quite sure how you're going to deploy a SIM in that type of environment. I'm having trouble going into any greater detail without knowing more specifics about what they want to know about. But that's certainly a question if you want to email me there, and in the slide deck, my email address is there. We can follow that up offline.
Okay. Question from Michael. How does your learning mode for anomaly detection work? Is there auto-tuning or a defined learning period?
So there's a couple of things to think about with anomaly detection. First of all, there's a number of forms of anomalies. Our protocol platform, the Application Data Monitor, actually understands anomalies from the perspective of protocol anomalies and application anomalies that are fixed and defined. The concept of anomalies with respect to packet flow or behavioral analysis, heuristics, those are anomalies which have to be learned over a period of time, and that really requires some length and breadth of analysis. The learning mode for anomaly detection is defined by the platform. It's from the IPS's perspective. If you're performing the analysis on the IPS from its traffic flow and the packets it sees, we actually have an automatic anomaly detection wizard that walks you through after a certain number of or volume of events or flows have gone through. We can then analyze the information and determine what baseline looks like and allow you to define what your thresholds are based upon higher than or lower than a certain percentage of that calculated baseline. When it comes to application anomalies, it's pretty much well known that if there's a behavior that's being seen from an application that is outside the normal behavior pattern of that application, the application anomalies should be fired immediately. So there's no learning process required. That's a process that's already been gone through, and it's the fixed and strict knowledge of that protocol or application function that goes into the detection of an anomaly. So with respect to heuristics and learning, it's a time-based model of a certain event volume or flow volume that's being analyzed. In the case of application anomaly, it's fixed in the policy and updated on a regular basis.
Okay. Thank you. We have time for one last question. PCI tells us not to store credit card numbers unencrypted. As our log contains such information, we encrypt our log repository. Do SIEM solutions typically encrypt their storage?
Adrian, you want to take that, or should I?
I'll take the first cut at it. So most of the log management vendors and several of the SIEM vendors we've spoken with offer the option of encrypting the data storage. Not every one, but most of them have the option. I haven't seen a case necessarily where they're collecting events with the credit card information, and you've usually tried to avoid that.
I would agree, and I would say that from the platforms we've looked at, both in the industry and elsewhere, it's the penalty sometimes of performance that the encryption would then reflect upon the storage. While encrypting the data is necessary for protection of that information, the penalty to do so in terms of resources might be significant. So as Adrian mentioned, it's typically the use case or the best practices that I've seen that the content of the log not contain sensitive data. If it does contain it, that it be masked in some way by replacement of certain characters. And if it does require that it be stored, then the only thing you can do is find a solution that has encryption of the raw storage. Our solution does offer an encryption model. As Adrian mentioned, it's an option, but our database itself and where the data is stored in our own proprietary database also enforces a great deal of protection based on the fact that it's not a queryable database. It's not something you can just go up to and issue with standardized tools that are available. It's self-contained within our appliance and is managed by our tools.
Okay. That's all the time that we have for questions. If we didn't get to your question, I apologize, and you can just drop us an email or Adrian an email, and we'd be happy to get back to you. I'd like to thank Adrian Lane of Securosis and Michael Leland of Nitro Security for joining us today. The presentation is available for download from the Nitro Security website. The archived version of this webcast will be available tomorrow. And you can also find the complete white paper developed by Adrian and Securosis on the Nitro website at nitrosecurity.com/whitepapers. Michael, Adrian, thank you both again, and that concludes our webcast.